Welcome to F1 in Schools State Competition for 2020. I'm Jon Thomson, and joining me in commentary today is current Australian Rally Champion Harry Bates.
Hi John, and hi to all the students, parents and family watching from home and school. It's going to be an exciting competition and we're looking forward to watching the cars compete.
Obviously, due to the COVID pandemic, we can't have all of the students here at the competition today, but there are 98 teams and more than 360 students participating. There's going to be some great racing, but first let's find out a little bit more about the F1 in Schools program. F1 in Schools is a global competition that gives school students the opportunity to participate in a science, technology, engineering and maths project, also known as a STEM project, like no other. Every year, over 17,000 schools from 51 countries take part in this exciting competition to design and build the world's fastest miniature Formula One car. Just like in Formula One, the cars need to be built in line with extensive regulations, and any breach of those regulations will incur a time penalty for the team. The cars are powered by a single CO2 canister and race along a 20-metre straight track. The 3 to 6 member teams are set up in a similar manner to a real Formula One team, with each individual responsible for a specific aspect of the project. As they follow a pathway from designing through analysis, testing and manufacturing and onto the racetrack, students are given access to real-world technology like industry-standard 3D engineering design software and computational fluid dynamics modelling. Recognised globally as more than just a car race, the holistic nature of the competition introduces students to the possibility of a career in STEM, while developing their problem-solving, project management, communication, presentation, teamwork, innovation, self-promotion, collaboration, marketing and entrepreneurial skill set. In fact, students involved in the program have gone on to work with companies like the Airbus Design Centre and Formula One teams. Like any competition of this kind, the immediate reward is a fast car and a good result. Winning teams at the state level go on to compete nationally, with the national winner racing at the World Finals. These finals are held in a different location each year, usually in conjunction with a Formula One Grand Prix. F1 in Schools continues to change the perception of science, technology, engineering and mathematics, giving students the chance to compete on the world stage while developing clear, informed pathways to a career in engineering, Formula One, science, marketing and technology. It's a truly global educational program, changing lives around the world. It's a fantastic program and one that has the support of many of the actual Formula One teams. And to tell us a little bit more about the relationship between Formula One and F1 in Schools, it's great to be able to welcome Sam Michael, who for many years was an engineer and designer with the Williams and McLaren Formula One teams. Sam, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Sam, what's been your career journey?
When I was really young, I was into motorcycles. And then a rally driver called Neil Bates took me for a drive in his Datsun 1600 and I was immediately changed to cars. And from that point on, I was into rallying for a couple of years, but I really got the open wheeler bug. And to get into open wheelers, you've really got to get to Europe. That's where it's all happening. But I think at an early stage, I realised that I wanted to be involved in the mechanical engineering side of things.
Making it through to be the sporting director at McLaren is a remarkable performance, a remarkable achievement. Can anyone achieve that sort of goal?
Yeah, of course, because it's as long as you keep focusing on the first order principles of engineering, then you'll be able to make that contribution. You've got to be very committed to do motor racing in general. But I'd say that if I look at the energy put in at grassroots sports, it's almost the same time as what we'd spend in Formula One.
So what can engineering lead you to in a career?
So if you look at all the STEM fields now, you're dealing with them in lots of great industries. If you look at where the world's going with automation and decision making and deep learning, it's a very wide career if you can get a good solid holding in engineering.
Yeah. How do Australian engineers rate on the world stage?
Yeah, very highly. I mean, they always have done though, even well before my time. in motor racing. And that, those grassroots were probably set by people like Ron Turanak and and others that were many decades before me. I think the reputation of definitely New Zealanders, Australians and South Africans in Formula One is extremely strong even today.
What do you think there is to learn for students in the F1 from Schools program?
Well, I've been involved in F1 in schools since it began, right back at the beginning, which is well over 20 years ago now. There's no other sort of program that sort of tries to consolidate pieces of learning that would really apply in an F1 team. Everything from design, marketing, manufacturing, through to operations with the race that they have. There's no other industry that combines all that, or program if you like. But even if they end up in another sector, you've taught them how to do something quickly, and you've taught them how to effectively run an equivalent to a breakthrough strategy or a rapid results program, where you can take an idea, form a team, and very quickly get a result.
So what advice would you give students about choosing their career path?
Well, I think you've got to really do what you love. So at the end of the day, you can be driven by competition, you can be driven by wanting to understand things, but you really have to go down. If you're going to have a long career in something, then the best thing to do is to do what you love the most. I also think having a broad education, because it's probably becoming rarer and rarer that someone stays in one career for their whole life. And again, going back to your question about something like F1 in schools, if you have that, STEM covers pretty much 90% of businesses these days. So it'll give you those skill sets.
Thanks so much, Sam. Well, isn't it great to have Sam available to talk with us and share some of his thoughts and insights on the relationship between F1 in schools and Formula One. Well, as we said in our earlier story, the cars designed by teams participating in this competition need to adhere to a strict set of rules and regulations, just like real Formula One cars. The process of judging if the cars meet those specifications is called scrutineering. Let's look a little deeper into what's involved in scrutineering a miniature F1 car.
Scrutineering is all about safety and compliance. Mainly trying to make sure obviously the cars comply with the regulations that are set. There's certain things they could break that would actually make the car faster, so we're trying to put restrictions on that to keep it sort of a level playing field, but then there's also some there that are for safety reasons.
Scrutineering is a process that's all about measuring what the students produce. They design it in CAD, but the scrutineering process actually manages and measures what's actually being produced.
Well, this event I've been measuring all the wings and clearances around the wings, air spaces, air gaps, that sort of thing, spans, chord, thickness of the wings.
So obviously, we sort of set certain regulations to make sure the cars are safe and we're not going to injure anyone throughout the race. In past competitions, we've had obviously a whole range of different issues. We have wheels falling off, we have wheel caps falling off, we've had wings fly off, we've had canisters punching through the front of the canister housing. There's a whole range of different issues that we've had in the past.
Common mistakes that are made in terms of the design and trying then to manage the tolerances that are necessary to produce the car are around looking at the rules that might say a particular element of the car has to be larger or shorter than a given dimension, and the students design right to that dimension thinking they can get it perfect, forgetting that one swipe of sandpaper against it is going to maybe remove 0.1 of a millimetre, and they go from being 0 to 0 because the design is right. It might have been cut right in the mill, but that little bit of extra sandpaper is wiped off, and they go from being 26 mil thick to 25.99 across.
Cadet class teams only have one car, so there'll be two teams going head-to-head on the track in each race. Before we get started, let's take a look at what the cadet class is all about.
The cadet class is for students who are new to the F1 in Schools program and features a simplified set of rules and regulations compared to the other classes. Students use CAD software to design their car and then use a CNC machine to manufacture their car from a balsa wood block. The design must include a chamber for a CO2 canister to power the car along the track. No 3D printing is allowed, and the wheels and balsa wood block are standardised across all teams. Each team has up to 3 members, and students produce just one car, a poster outlining their work, and an engineering compliance drawing. Unlike the other classes, students in the Cadet class don't need to present portfolios, give an oral presentation, or construct and design a trade display. The rules in place for the Cadet class simplify the design and build process for new students, and because of that, the team can't progress past the state level competition. This introductory class is a stepping stone for students looking to move up to the development or professional class in the future.
Okay, it's time to go racing now, and our first Cadet class race has 2 teams from Magdalene Catholic College, Scrutineering Zarafa.
And from Ferny Grove State High School, Cyclone Poesis.
Let's head to the track.
A clear win there for Scrutineering Zarafa.
But both teams have copped some time penalties. Scrutineering Zarafa 1.7 millimetres too long, so they've copped a time penalty.
And Cyclone Poesis also with a small time penalty for the exclusion zone behind the front wheel.
And our next race features 2 of the 6 teams from Brighton Secondary School in South Australia. First up, the Gold Diggers, an all-female crew in a fantastic looking gold car.
And in the second team is 3 boys from Brighton Secondary School in Team Uber. We should explain that each team gets 2 races, 1 in each lane, which is what gives you the individual times, and then you get an overall time which includes your penalties.
And speaking of penalties, Uber's copped a small time penalty there, but even taking into consideration that penalty, the Gold Diggers were clear winners.
So up next we've got 2 teams from Glendale Technology High School. The first team is Axion Racing.
And the second is Comet Racing. Both cars are a little bit heavy. One's 80 grams compared to around 50 for some of the other competitors, and the other one 62 grams, so they're going to struggle a bit.
So as expected, the lighter of the 2 cars, Axion Racing, took the win there. Probably slightly off the pace, and both cars carrying some penalties as well that they'll have to have added to their overall time. Axion Racing for front wing clear airspace, and front visibility wasn't to specification.
And a similar penalty for Comet Racing, but also a penalty for virtual cargo space as well. For our next race, we've got 2 of our younger teams from St Anthony's Primary School in New South Wales, Shadow Racing, with 3 Year 5 students, 2 guys and a girl, one to watch for the future.
And from Penrith Christian School, we've got Adrenaline, which is made up of 2 Year 7 students. Let's see how they go.
Well, that was an incredibly close performance there, and neither team had any race penalties.
Exactly, and we've had Adrenaline lay down an incredible time overall of 2.497 seconds, so that is the new time to beat. Another great battle coming up here. From Magdalene Catholic College, we've got Team Cerberus with 3 Year 7 students. Now they do start with a penalty, so they're going to need a quick time to make sure that they can get up here.
And from Mount View High School, 2 Year 8 students who put together a fantastic looking car called Night Phoenix. Well, that was a particularly close race, incredibly close indeed, and when you take the time penalty into account, it was very close.
Well, exactly, our tightest battle yet. The Team Cerberus have got up by the very tightest of margins, 1,000th of a second. We have 2 very distinctive looking cars for our next race, both from Mackay North State High School, the blue car of Elite Racing,
and the bright Ferrari red car of Accelerate. Let's go to the track. So lane 2 proving a clear winner in both of those races, but the blue car from Elite Racing proved to be the overall winner, taking a strong win in race 1 and a very close second in the next race.
And a reasonably competitive time overall of 2.612 seconds. So great racing from both cars.
So in this next race, we've got two hometown teams from Parramatta Marist High School. The blue car, Tempest, and a car that is probably Toyota Red, Harry.
Exactly. In Toyota Red, we've got the Blink team. So 2 home cars. Let's see how they go against one another.
It looks like we've had a failure on the start line, a failure to fire from Team Blink, so they're going to have a rerun of their own. Let's see how that goes.
All right, both cars have now put down a time, so we're going to go for race 2, the 2 of them together. And, whoa, you wouldn't believe it. Blink's had a sensor failure, so we're going to have another run for Blink.
And here's the run for Blink on its own, and goes through the line, and it still gets beaten by Team Tempest.
Another race here between 2 teams from Brighton Secondary School. We've got Error 404.
And Team Blue Sky, which is actually a white car, looking a bit like a duck actually, but a very quick looking car indeed.
So Error 404 does start with reasonably substantial penalties. They were over their front wingspan and rear wingspan, and they also picked up a penalty for visibility in front view.
Well, in race 1 there, a clear victory for Team Blue Sky, and moving across into the other lane for race 2, they won by a clear margin again over their compatriots from South Australia from Error 404.
Error 404 may not have won that race, but I think they're winning the creative name stakes so far today.
Next up, we have a race between 2 more cadet class teams. This time, Pacific Hills Christian School, an all-female team. The team's name is Pandora.
And then from Mount View High School, we've got Zeus Racing, a solo entry from a Year 9 student named May Webster.
And I might mention that Pandora's had a time penalty for a very, very minimal oversight, just 0.3 of a millimetre too low in the ride height of the vehicle.
In race 1, Zeus Racing, the clear winner with a very quick time.
And in race 2, Pandora across the line first, but of course their time penalty adjusts them an overall.
So Zeus Racing with a very clear win in that one, a very competitive time also, which actually slots them into 2nd place. Let's go and have a look at the overall leaderboard now to see where we're at.
So at the moment, Adrenaline leading overall in 1st place, ahead of Zeus, with Cerberus in 3rd and Night Phoenix in 4th at the moment.
And obviously that 2.497 seconds there is the time to beat, a very, very quick time.
Very quick indeed, and the others are going to have to try pretty hard to beat that. We're going to take a quick break from racing now to profile one of the teams competing. Axion is a 5-member team from Penrith Christian School. Let's take a look at their F1 in Schools journey.
So my role is the design engineer and the graphic designer. So I design the car, I do a lot of research behind the car, all the materials, basically every step that needs to be done before the manufacturing stage.
My role in the team is the manufacturing engineer. So I take the design that design engineer gave to me and I make it a reality.
Alright, so the role I play in the team is I'm the marketing manager. So basically I control all the social media, so this includes the Instagram. I link up with our graphic designer, bring the idea to him, he makes the graphic, I get it back, I post it, bada bing, bada boom.
I think the most interesting aspect would be just the amount of stuff that I've learnt is insane. I honestly, before this, wouldn't have even dreamed of being the person to make the car. And so getting to code the machine and getting to spend all this time making the car, it's honestly epic, it's great.
So I think the most interesting thing about being involved in F1 in schools is getting to collaborate with industry, people who are professionals, who know what they've been doing for years, and being able to get information from them and take the aspects that they've researched for years and they've been in the industry with for years, and being able to implement that into our own car and our own design and our own team and our own business.
When it came to collaborating with the industry, obviously it's been a little bit difficult this year, but we have amazing technology and things, and so we were able to still get in contact with our sponsors and discuss ideas with them, and they were still able to provide us materials and things, and so we just had to work our way around the barriers.
So I think the most important lesson that I've learned from this competition is that I can get anything done as long as I have the mindset and the will to do it.
Would I recommend this program to other students? Yes, definitely, 100%. It teaches you so many life skills. It teaches you self-discipline, teamwork, communication. These things they're really needed in the real world, and it's important that you involve yourself in such an extracurricular program that teaches you these life skills, so that when you go into the work industry, you're better prepared.
Great to get an insight there on what goes on in putting a team together for this F1 in Schools competition. Now it's time to get back to the track and see some racing.
For our next race, we have a battle between two teams from Mackay Christian College. Virgo Racing. Now, an interesting little point about this car, the nose cone and fins are moulded to look like a hammerhead shark.
And their fellow schoolmates from Mackay Christian College, C92. And this team, I might say, takes a time penalty for the permitted height of the front obstruction being just 1 millimetre too high, 16 millimetres instead of the allowable 15 millimetres.
Some very tight racing here between the two teams from Mackay Christian College. Virgo Racing taking a slim victory in race 1, and then C92 taking an even more slim victory in race 2.
Yeah, and that penalty that C92 copped across both races meant that they finished behind their teammates from Mackay Christian College. That means that Virgo Racing now slots into third overall in the overall leaderboard. Next up in the cadet class, we have from Queensland, Holy Spirit College with their Icebreaker team.
And from Ulladulla High School on New South Wales' south coast, a team called the Gophers.
I might say the Icebreakers team a little bit overweight, 67 grams the car weighs, which is about 15 or 16 grams heavier than they probably need to be competitive.
Yeah, both teams coming in with a bit of a penalty here as well. So quite a large penalty to start with, you'd have to say. We'll see how they go. And we can see here in both races, Gophers with a dominant win. I guess that just goes to show how important having a light car is in this competition.
Yeah, but as we said before, 67 grams is not a lot of weight when you talk about it, but 17 grams makes all the difference in this class of racing.
Exactly. So a good win there to the Gophers. Next up in the cadet class, from all the way up north, Mackay North State High School, is Team Kronos.
And from the Southport School on the Gold Coast, Speedy Tomatoes in the red car. And we might mention that the Kronos team has a car that looks very much like it's been inspired by F1 cars.
Absolutely, it looks like the team have done a lot of work when doing their design in taking into an account, I guess, what an F1 car design looks like. And I think it's important to note in this cadet category the learnings of what they're taking forward with them in their education.
Very much so. These students are very young, year 7, year 8. They're going to take the lessons they've learned here in F1 in Schools this year through the rest of high school, possibly into university and into careers in STEM after that.
It looks like a clear win there for Kronos. So Kronos will walk away with the win in this race with an overall time of 2.694.
Well, 2 more cars from the big team from Brighton Secondary School. This time we see Big Fat Speed
up against Star Power, and we've got 3 girls from Star Power up against 3 boys from Big Fat Speed. So it'll be interesting to see how this one plays out.
Very much so. Might also notice that Big Fat Speed is about 11 grams over the minimum weight, so that's going to be something to watch in this race as well.
So in race 1 there, it looks like a clear win to Star Power. And then again in race 2, another clear win to Star Power. So again, what we're talking about with that weight advantage, Star Power coming in at 52 grams.
It might not seem like a lot, but that 10 grams makes all the difference.
All right, another great race building up here from East Launceston Primary School all the way down in Tasmania is Team Light Speed.
And from South Australia, the Charles Campbell College team, an all-female crew with their empowerment car, which, if you look at it, is incredibly sleek. And I've been told that they've done a lot of wind tunnel testing or simulated wind tunnel testing and actually reduced their drag coefficient from 0.38 down to 0.19, which is a considerable amount.
A lot of the teams do this, but you'd have to say that Team Empowerment have certainly taken things to the edge. In race 1 there, it looks like a narrow win to Light Speed, although some sort of failure with the timing on Empowerment, so it'll have to have a rerun.
They'll get a rerun. Let's have a look at that now.
Wow, and in the rerun, an incredible time there from Empowerment, 1.219 seconds. That is the fastest individual run time of the day.
So Empowerment goes to the top of the provisional leaderboard with a fantastic time there from the girls from Charles Campbell College in South Australia.
And race 2 again, incredibly tight there, but Empowerment coming out on top, but an incredible effort from both teams. I suspect that this will put Empowerment quite near to the top in the overall times.
Well, I in fact think it takes them to the top, and they're going to be very hard to beat. We've only got a few more competitors left in the cadet class. Great effort there from the girls from South Australia.
Now for a race of 2 teams from the same school, Norwood Primary School in Tasmania. First team is the Bricks. They're named the Bricks because all 3 team members have an interest in Lego.
And the other team from Norwood, Marshall Associates. Now that might seem on the surface like a name after the team manager, Marshall Richards, but in fact all 3 members of the team have something to do with the name Marshall. I just pulled up their poster, and Remy Thomas, his middle name is Marshall, and the other team member, Liam Bailey, is in class 5-6 Marshall, so that's how they came up with the name Marshall Associates.
Okay, so in race 1 there, it looks like a bit of a win to Marshall Associates. And race 2, very tight, almost equal on the line, but once you take into account the rather large penalty for Marshall Associates, it's actually a win to the Bricks in that one.
Indeed, the Bricks win, but both cars quite heavy again. I'm pointing out that Marshall Associates weighed the scales in at about 70 grams, and the Bricks weighed in at about 68 grams, which is about 18 and 20 grams over the minimum weight, respectively. So that brings us to our final race in the cadet class, and can any of these teams in this last race knock off that fantastic time from Team Empowerment? First up, we've got from Norwood Primary School in Tasmania yet again, the team, the Titans.
And from Canberra High School, in my hometown, is the team of Uzvara.
So they're in race 1, a big win to the Titans.
And then in race 2, it looks like Uzvara was a bit closer, but still a win to the Titans.
So both teams took some weight penalties, and neither team were fast enough to challenge that time set earlier by Empowerment.
Let's have a look now at the overall leaderboard of the cadet class. And in first place, we had Empowerment with that incredible time of 2.488. So a great job by that school.
Indeed, a fantastic job there. Adrenaline in second place, just 9 milliseconds or 9 thousandths of a second behind them. So incredibly close racing.
And in third, we had Zeus Racing, fourth, Virgo Racing, and fifth, Cerberus.
So the cars are going at incredibly fast speed down this 20-metre track, and the students are really applying so many lessons from STEM, from science, technology, engineering and maths, that are really going to be able to apply throughout their secondary school careers and into university, as I mentioned earlier. And I might also mention there's an introductory class to this racing as well, which uses paper cars instead of the balsa wood cars, and they use an air pump instead of the CO2 cylinders. So that's something that allows people to get involved in this level of F1 in schools.
Exactly, and the cadet class here at F1 in schools is the entry-level class. So an incredible set of times already today, very, very competitive, and really a huge congratulations to all teams for their outstanding effort.
Okay, that wraps up our cadet class racing. Next up, we go into the development class. Well, there's been so much exciting racing so far in both the cadet and development classes. It's indicative of the skills and talents of these STEM students, and a validation of the hours of hard work that's gone into not just the development, but the manufacturing of these cars, and the collaboration of each member of each of the teams. Someone else who's familiar with exactly what it takes to develop and run a successful race team at the top level is the former head of operations at the world champion Red Bull Formula One racing team, Professor Richard Hopkins. We're so glad that he's been able to join us in the studio today. G'day, Richard. So, you've had an amazing career in Formula One that started way back with the Brabham team and doing up seatbelts for the multiple world champion Ayrton Senna when you were a young mechanic. Give us a bit of an outline of the journey you've had in Formula One.
Grew up always being a Formula One fan, but really back when I was a young lad had no aspiration of being in Formula One. I think at that very early age, I think I saw Formula One as being so aspirational and to the point of being unachievable. However, just an opportunity came about whilst I was at school. I was 15 years old and the teacher announced that all the kids had to go and do a week's work experience. I had absolutely no idea what I was going to do until I got home, and it was my father who said, well, why don't you go and do a week at a Formula One team? To which I laughed, and I think my mother laughed along too, thinking what a crazy idea that would be. However, I phoned a couple of teams, first one being McLaren, who didn't operate anything like that at the time. Second one was Brabham. And they said yes. And along I went, and you can't imagine my excitement. And I think I must have made a reasonably decent impression, because it was only sort of 4 or 5 months later that I phoned them up and asked if I could go and visit again for the day and see the new car and see all the friends that I'd made. But they invited me along about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, which I was really disappointed about because I was hoping to spend the whole day there. But I walked through the door and they interviewed me and offered me a job on the spot, which just absolutely knocked me for six. I got home, my parents didn't believe me. I had to phone them back up again and say, did that actually really happen? I had my last exam at the age of 16 at school and on the Thursday, and I started at Brabham's working for a Formula One team at the age of 16 on the Monday.
Well, it sounds to me like you've taken that hands-on experience and really created a career journey that's led to leadership. But you never went to university, but now you're a professor. What sort of words of wisdom would you offer to these students about that career journey?
That's kind of ironic. Look, throughout my school, I wasn't necessarily the best student. However, if Formula One didn't come about, there was a journey planned into college and later, hopefully, onto university. Obviously, the offer of working for a Formula One team at the age of 16 was just something that I couldn't, look over. So my path did change. And one became a very hands-on experience, not that tertiary education, but a different form of education, an education in industry.
So clearly you obviously don't have to go to university to be a success, particularly in something like Formula One. So when would a student look at, say, taking a trade rather than going straight to university?
Hey, look, I think the world has changed slightly. We're talking, when I made this decision, it was over 30 years ago, and maybe having that tertiary education, having that degree was lesser important than it is today. However, university isn't for everybody, So for sure, having a degree today certainly helps you. It helps you get in the door of a lot of organisations, certainly even Formula One teams today. But there is still a choice. Yeah. There is still a choice. There is a choice to take a similar path to what I did and take that learning experience outside of an educational experience. And there's still a lot of benefit in doing that, for sure.
So where do you think F1 in Schools participants should focus their energies?
Well, if they want to go into Formula One, it's take what you're doing now, try and understand what discipline you're either good at or you want to aim towards, and take it on from there. Look, Formula One in schools is such a great stepping stone for these guys. It's such a rich environment to learn, supported brilliantly by Re-Engineering Australia also.
Well, Professor Richard Hopkins, thanks for your time and your words of wisdom.
Pleasure. Thanks very much. Cheers.
Well, that brings us to our next class of racing, development class. To find out a little bit more about development class, let's take a look at this story. The development class is an entry-level competition for students in years 5 to 9 who are new to the F1 in Schools program or have only previously competed in the Cadet class. Students use CAD software to design their car and then a CNC machine for manufacturing the body and rear wing. In the development class, the car body and rear wing must be machined from balsa wood. But teams can use an alternative non-metallic front wing. 3D printing of the front wing is permitted, and the design must include a chamber for the CO2 canister to power the car along the track. There are some other restrictions in this class to simplify the machining process during manufacturing, and the teams are required to use standardised REA kit wheels that can design their own axles. There's a reduction in portfolio and trade display requirements, but teams must address all of the judging criteria in order to be eligible for points. They do this through a 10-minute verbal presentation, along with engineering and marketing interviews with the judges. Development class teams must manufacture 2 identical race-ready cars based on their CAD design and engineering compliance diagram. Okay, well that gives you a bit of background on what makes development class tick. Let's get into the racing, and the first team on track today is from St Francis Xavier College in Canberra, the Apex team, Harry.
Yeah, SFX, that school's known as in Canberra, but the name Apex obviously is derived from the concept of taking the shortest distance around a corner. In motorsport, we're very familiar with the term.
Okay, let's go to the racing and look at how the Apex ACT car performs.
And a best individual time there for their car of 1.322. They are carrying some small penalties, and their overall time is 2.652. So not sure exactly yet where that'll stack up in the times, John, but 2.652 to get us underway. We'll know more as more cars come to the track.
Indeed we will.
Next up on track is another team from St Francis Xavier College in Canberra. This team is called Momentum SFX, so maybe a bit of in-house rivalry here between the two teams from the same school.
I would imagine so, yes. And many members of this team actually have set their sights on a career in defence engineering, and coming from Canberra, that's obviously very strong on their minds.
So in terms of on-track performance, their fastest individual time there is a 1.433, and their overall time is a 2.938. So slightly slower than their rivals there in Apex ACT from SFX as well, but not a bad performance, just a few tenths off.
Yeah, they carried a couple of time penalties there that really weighed heavily on their overall time.
Our next team are called Lightspeed Racing, and they are from Joseph Banks Secondary College all the way in Western Australia. It's a great looking car, John.
Very much so. And you know, part of this whole F1 in Schools program is actually coming up with the budgets, coming up with all of the business plans. And this team actually budgeted to raise $500, and they actually raised $660 for the effort.
Such an important part of the whole process.
So this team's actually scored a couple of time penalties for exclusion zone behind the front wheels and also the wingspan of their car.
Yeah, and it probably has cost them a fastest individual run time there of 1.527 seconds and a Grand Prix time of 3.216. So I suspect that will have them a little off the pace, but it's a big effort to get a team from Perth all the way over to the East Coast.
Very much so. Our next competitors in the development class are from Tasmania Riverside High School and their Atomic Racing effort. Harry, this is a really sleek looking car, fantastic effort from them in terms of aesthetics.
Yeah, race cars often look best in white, and this one is a really sleek looking car.
So their team motto is power to succeed. So let's wait and see if the motto proves to be an omen for them, Harry.
A good start, I'd have to say. Their fastest individual run time there is 1.206. But one thing I'd like to point out is they managed a 1.220, a 1.246, a 1.206, and a 1.23. So all of their times within half a tenth. And
ask any race driver what the key to success is, and it's that consistency that always comes out.
Exactly, and a great Grand Prix time there of 2.452. So they are our new leaders, and I believe that time will be very hard to beat. So well done to Atomic Racing from Riverside High School.
Well, our next competitor in the development class is again from Joseph Banks Secondary College in Perth, and the team this time is Supersonic Racing.
Yeah, many of the members of this team have competed in F1 in Schools previously, which has given them a lot of confidence in this year's competition, and it's good to see them entered in the development class.
In fact, they won last year's state finals as cadets, so their goal this year was to make it to the state championships, and that's what they've done. So a great effort already from this team.
So a fastest individual run time of 1.411 there. They were carrying some penalties, so it's probably not as good as it could be, and an overall time there of 2.888. So as previous state champions, they'll probably be slightly disappointed with that, a fair way off the pace of the team from Tasmania.
Indeed, those time penalties for the front wingspan really costing them dearly in their first effort in the development class.
Next team on track is a team called Odin from Tasmania. They're from Norwood Primary School, and John, we have a very young team here.
Indeed, all year sixes, which is amazing to be in the development class, not the cadet class, and it's a great effort, and the car they've come up with looks fantastic.
Yeah, they mentioned that the design of their car took longer than expected, and the team encountered a few issues along the way, but they did find, which is good at such a young age, they're already learning, that a significant factor of F1 car speed is aerodynamics and how the car cuts through the air. A time there of 1.343 is their best individual run time, and their overall fastest, or their Grand Prix time, is 2.782. So a commendable effort for a group of year sixes, and I think that bodes very well for their future in F1 in schools.
Well, particularly if they carry it all the way through high school, another 6 or so years, they're going to be real contenders in years to come if they stick with it and go into the professional class as well.
Absolutely.
So our next team is from South Australia. The Redbacks, obviously also the name of the South Australian Sheffield Shield cricket team, the Redbacks as well, but they've adopted it for this team in F1 in schools, and this particular team is from Christie's Beach High School in the Adelaide suburbs.
They had some support as a sponsor from Sage Automotive, who were willing to financially support the team and provide whatever materials were needed, which is a fantastic amount of support for a school team like this. And looking like a pretty strong on-track performance here. 1.224 is their best individual run time, so that's reasonably up there.
And I might add, no time penalties for this team, so they've done particularly well.
And an overall time there of 2.521, so that is very competitive. That'll put them right up there inside our top 5 at the moment, so I'd have to say a strong performance from the Redbacks. All right, our next team comes from slightly west of our current location, Blue Mountains Grammar School in New South Wales, and this team is called Peak.
Yeah, well, their name actually fits nicely with their slogan, and that is aim higher. And of course, the Blue Mountains a little bit higher than Sydney. But this team, mentored by some of the other former Blue Mountains Grammar F1 in Schools National and World Championship finalists of the past. So let's take a look at their times there, a 1.455 their fastest time.
Yeah, carrying some pretty heavy penalties there, so that would have really cost them 2/10 for both cars of the penalties they're carrying through, so this will affect their overall time. Yeah, 2.979 there, their overall time, so not really competitive against the fastest couple we've seen so far today, but still a stellar effort from Blue Mountains Grammar School.
Our next team is another Victorian team, this time Alamanda College and their team Hydra.
Yeah, another great looking car, channeling a little bit of that Mark Webber Jaguar look from the early 2000s, but I suspect it's probably their school colours on the car there.
Obviously being from Victoria, they've been shut down during COVID and they've had to interact with each other via Teams and Zoom.
Yeah, great work by these Melbourne teams to even be here really under the circumstances. A best individual run time there of 1.377 once their penalties are applied, so not bad. And a Grand Prix time there of 2.779, so pretty good effort from the Victorian team.
Yeah, take those time penalties out and they would have been up there and very competitive in the top 10, I would have thought.
Like we keep saying though, the time penalties are everything, and if you come in with a clean slate, you've got a much better chance. Our next team is another from the island of Tasmania, another team from Riverside High School. This time they're called Peregrine 4.
And of course, the Peregrine Falcon was inspiration to them, particularly the sleek aerodynamic features of the Peregrine Falcon when it's in full dive mode. So a great job to get them on track. And let's have a look at their times. Fantastic performance there, the best fastest time of 1.209. They've had to carry a small time penalty of 0.05 of a second, but still a great result. And their Grand Prix time puts them well into the top 10 with a 2.535.
Yeah, a very strong performance again from these Tasmanian teams. So I think the Tasmanians are proving to be pretty strong this year at the state finals.
So our next team is another team from the south coast of New South Wales, another one of a number of teams from Ulladulla High School, and this time it's Stick Shift.
I think it would be fair to say that the inspiration for their team name came from the American term for a manual gear stick, the stick shift.
And they've also taken some inspiration from real Formula One designs, and the car doesn't look like, unlike a real Formula One car of the current era. So a 265 I should say, for their fastest overall time.
Yeah, and then a Grand Prix time there of 2.6 seconds exactly. So not a bad effort from Ulladulla High School this time around again, and that'll put them somewhere inside the top 20. The next team on track is from Magdalene Catholic College in New South Wales, and they're called Imperium.
The team name actually is derived from the Latin term for power, but also uses the Hindi term, which means the empire. And their logo is split into 6 sections representing each of the members of the team, and also the 6 face, which signifies unity of the team. So let's look at their times, and a very good time of 1.257 for their fastest overall.
And an overall time there of 2.551, so that'll actually put them well into the top 10. A very good performance there from the team Imperium.
Certainly one to watch. Okay, so our next races are from Newington College, another team from that venerable school in Sydney's inner west, and this time it's Aeolus Racing, Harry. And their team member, Lucas, would like to continue the lessons he learnt from F1 in schools to study either aeronautical engineering or in the Defence Force.
It's great to hear these reasonably young kids having such clear goals for the future. It's really, really cool.
Very much so. Wow, a sensational time there of 1.208. That's a very quick time indeed. And moving forward to their overall Grand Prix time, oh, that's even better, a 2.459. That puts them into second spot. And I think it's very close to our front markers at the moment.
Really close to taking the lead there for this team. I mean, they were within 0.007 of a second of Atomic Racing. So a great effort by the team from Newington College, and they're now sitting in second place. Next team on track is another New South Wales team from Blue Mountains Grammar School. It's the team Perpetual. Now their team name is derived by the combination of the words perpetual, alluding to the concept of infinity, and petrol, on which real F1 cars are powered. Of course, our F1 in schools vehicles are powered by CO2 canisters to get them down the track.
And I've got to say, another great looking car. They've done a fantastic job, a real wedge shape to this F1 in schools machine.
Yeah, so a pretty good individual best run time there of 1.333. And then a overall time there of 2.746. So probably not quite as high as what they wanted, but not a bad effort for the team from Blue Mountains Grammar School.
So our next competitors are Infinity Racing, and they're from Modbury High School in South Australia, Harry.
Yeah, a bunch of Year 9 students, so they'd be looking for a strong performance here today. They have said that one of the key areas for improvement for them in the future is finding sponsorship. They admitted that COVID-19 made it difficult for them, and they are carrying in some very small penalties, but let's see how they go on track. And a best individual run time there of 1.231. So with their small penalty applied of 0.05, that's actually a very competitive time on track for them. Going forward into their Grand Prix time now, and it's a time of 2.558. So a great effort for the team from South Australia, Infinity Racing. I think they should be proud. Another team now from down south in Tasmania. These guys are from Queechee High School. Their team is called Dynamism.
Indeed, the name Dynamism, grounded in the quality of being categorised by vigorous activity and progress. So let's hope that has translated into some performance on the track.
As first-time competitors in F1 in schools, their main goals were to meet and excel on all requirements and to be able to look back and be proud that they acted on their fullest. Now, by the looks of that car, that is already something to be proud of. An individual best run time there for Dynamism of 1.275, so not a bad effort.
Indeed, they've taken a small time penalty on just one of their chassis for the presentation of the front wing. Their overall Grand Prix time, a 2.761, probably a little bit disappointing, but still a good effort from the Tasmanian team. And another team from Tasmania this time, from John Calvin School. and the team's called Scorchers.
I have to say, the car they've turned up with looks something like the Batmobile.
It does, a cross between the Batmobile and possibly a world land speed record car, but yeah, a very striking car indeed.
Now, unfortunately, this team bringing in some pretty large penalties. One of their chassis bringing in a penalty of 0.25 and the other chassis bringing in a penalty of 0.15. So that will affect their result.
Certainly will. Let's take a look at their times. And a fastest overall time of 1.340 and a Grand Prix time of 2.828.
But it is important to note they did have an individual run time there without penalties of 1.190. So one of those schools that can probably have a look at their times in pure pace and think, well, if we come back next year with a legal car, maybe it'll be closer to the top. Another team now from across the Nullarbor, it's Eton Community College from Western Australia, and the team is called Dyno Racing.
And obviously dyno racing comes from the word dynamometer, which is the apparatus used to, of course, measure power in a car, with a subliminal association, they say, to the word dinosaur as well.
The team chose to enter this competition as all their members were eager to learn new technology, skills, and also to learn from industry experts, which is great to hear.
So let's look at how dyno racing went, and their fastest overall time of 1.419.
And a Grand Prix time there of 2.872. So that will have them outside the top 15 at this stage, but still, it's a big effort for these West Australian teams. I know we keep saying it, but the extra logistics involved in getting a car to the East Coast would be quite an effort.
Couldn't agree more. And obviously also a couple of small time penalties there didn't help the cause. Well, after some frenetic action on the track, it's time to take a breather, and perhaps let's have a look at the leaderboard and some pretty interesting results there so far, Harry.
Yeah, very tight at the top, as we've mentioned before, but in the lead is the Tasmanian team Atomic from Riverside High School. In second place is Aeolus Racing from here in Sydney, Newington College, and in third place the Redbacks.
Yeah, fantastic effort from all of the teams so far, and still a lot more teams to come. You know, the reality of this F1 in Schools program is not only about getting people into Formula One, although that might happen. The reality is this is about getting people to study and work in the STEM disciplines: science, technology, engineering and mathematics. And the real world applications that the students actually have to apply themselves to in this competition are very much front and centre in the design of these cars.
Yeah, exactly, and it's been great to read different students in the F1 in Schools contest have been putting down their goals for the future, you know, working in the Defence Force, working in engineering practices, working in aeronautical engineering, for example. I mean, we've seen some pretty lofty goals, but these kids are already applying themselves in the trade.
Yeah, some great results so far and more to come. The venue for the F1 in Schools competition today is here at Marist Brothers School in Parramatta. They have 4 teams involved in the racing, 2 in the cadet class, 1 in the development class and 1 in the professional class.
Redline Racing is made up of 4 Year 9 students. They're entered in the development class. Let's find out a little more about their team.
My role I play is the team manager. I essentially overlook everyone's work and how they're doing in the competition.
My role is the design engineer. What I do for the team is using computer-aided design, or CAD, to make our car.
My role in Redline is the lead engineer. I help the design engineer when he's designing the car with the scientific theories on how we can improve the car.
My role in the team is the manufacturer and the social media manager. I'm more the manufacturer though. I'm the one who basically makes the car from the balsa block which it's created from.
It's very interesting to see how, you know, when one person is working on the car file and someone else is working on the social media and someone else is looking at the aerodynamics and seeing all of it come together. You know, I think that's what a team's all about.
I think the most important lesson that I've learned from F1 in Schools would be design and improvement. So that is creating a design and checking how it goes and then improving it. You usually don't get to do this on any other subjects or anything, especially with CAD.
Our team mantra is pushing the red line in everything we do.
When a car pushes itself to the max, it's essentially redlining, it's achieving its maximum speed. Not only are we pushing ourselves, like with the car to the max to achieve the best possible outcomes, but we're also striving together, and from that you get a team. Collectively you can get a good group, collectively you have a strong team, and collectively you have Team Redline.
Just being in state was like a huge achievement for us as a team, and to think that to even have the thought that we might be going to nationals, and if we do make nationals we go to the finals, that will be like a huge accomplishment as a team.
Yeah, I would recommend it to anyone who wants to get into some teamwork, something new. It definitely gets you out of your comfort zone and teaches you a lot of things about collaborative teamwork and time management yourself, as well as other skills about physics and aerodynamics that you normally wouldn't learn.
It provides a good challenge and it allows you to gain a substantial amount of knowledge and information which you can use in your later life.
Well, great story there on Redline Racing. We're hoping to see them on track shortly, so we look forward to that.
But our next team is from Trinity Grammar School in Kew, Victoria. They're called Sakudo.
Sakudo, the name being derived from the Japanese word for speed. The team chose the name because the main focus is the speed of their car, of course, and also because they believe the team has the potential to create one of the fastest cars in the competition. Let's see if they're right. Well, a time of 1.231, their fastest overall time.
Pretty outstanding time there from Sakudo, actually, considering they did have a small penalty applied for some scrutineering indiscretions.
And a Grand Prix time of 2.561 seconds. And that's good enough to put them in the top 10 at this stage.
Yeah, great work from Sakudo, and another team from Victoria who no doubt had to battle through a tough few months in Melbourne, but a top effort by them.
Our next team, another Victorian team, this time from Alamander College, and it's Leo Talk.
Yeah, a great looking car, lovely white and blue colour scheme there, so it actually looks a lot like a real F1 car.
It certainly does, and the team derived the name from the word Leo, of course, meaning lion, and torque being the driving force, the power behind any power source. They've just taken a small time penalty on one of their cars, and none on one of the first car. So their fastest overall time, a 1.279. Not a bad effort there.
And that'll give them a Grand Prix time there of 2.576. So a good effort from Leo Talk. That'll put them right on the edge of the top 10.
Particularly considering they're all Year 7 students, so fairly young and at the entry level of this development class.
Yeah, very young team, but I'm sure they would love to graduate into the professional class one day.
Okay, so our next team is from Trinity Grammar School in Kew in Victoria, and the team Hermes.
Not to be confused with the high-end fashion brand, Hermes is actually the Greek god of speed. Throughout the competition, Team Hermes made a strong effort to keep in communication with their generous sponsors. They ensured progress, major decisions and other landmarks in the competition were relayed to them. So a great effort to keep their sponsors across exactly what they were doing and to keep them interested in where they were at in the competition.
Indeed. Let's have a look at their times. 1.312, their fastest overall. They've taken some time penalties of 0.15 of a second on both cars.
And an overall time there of 2.712. So that'll probably put them right on the edge of the top 15, top 20.
Well, next up we have yet another team from Riverside High School in Tasmania.
And this team is called Axion. They're made up of Year 7 students and an all-female team.
And of course, allium is another word for onion, and they call it that because it represents the many layers of skill that are in the team that have brought this car to fruition.
Yeah, and the team have focused on the vital employability skills they developed as part of their participation in F1 in schools. So yet another group of students who are thinking about their future.
So let's have a look at their times. Wow, 1.203, that's a very fast time indeed. No time penalties, and boy oh boy, when you add those up, a Grand Prix time of 2.461.
So straight up into third place. So great work for the team from Tasmania. I'm telling you, these Tasmanian teams are on fire today. Next team on track comes from Phoenix Peter 12 Community College in Victoria, and the team is called Legion Racing.
A very striking gold-coloured car, and of course the team chose the name because Legion represents what their team stands for: strength, unity and power.
Also some work in the wind tunnel, John.
Yes, they've used a virtual wind tunnel tool to try and get the best aerodynamic shape out of the car. So let's see how that applies to their performance and their time. They've done a reasonable time of a 1.256 fastest overall, but obviously some small time penalties on both machines. That means that their Grand Prix time, a 2.588.
Yeah, certainly in the top half of the field, so a pretty good effort from Team Legion there, but probably, you know, we keep saying it, but yet again another team who would have been much better off without some small penalties.
Our next team comes from St Anthony's Primary School in New South Wales, and the team is called Fast Fusion.
A team made up of relatively young students, year 6, so a great effort for them to be racing in the development class at such a young age.
They moved up from cadet class last year, having kept the same name, and the team's graphic designer, Sienna, is interested in a career in the aerospace software engineering field.
Now, one of their chassis is coming in with a penalty, so we'll see if that costs them. But a fastest individual run time there of 1.185. That is the fastest run we've seen today.
Absolutely, that's very quick indeed.
Translates into a fast overall time, 2.465, so only good enough for 4th place.
Yeah, they would have been right up there potentially vying for a win in this competition, the development class, if not for those penalties.
Absolutely, but nonetheless, an incredible effort to be so far up the field, and they should be very proud. Fastest individual run time of the day so far. Our next team are called Strike One, and they're from Gold Coast Christian College in Queensland. They're made up of Year 8 students and a pretty clean looking white car.
Yeah, the name comes from a result of an intense brainstorming session in the team and speaks to the idea of achieving their goals even if you only have one shot at them. So interestingly also, the team's graphic designer, Cameron, would love to pursue a career in interior design and believes that many of the skills she's developed in F1 in schools will help her on that path.
So a best individual run time there for Strike One of 1.329. We should mention that they are carrying in some penalties for their front wing clear airspace, so not quite meeting the regulations there. And an overall time there of 2.676, so that will have them inside the top 20.
Good job. Well, next up is another team from South Australia, this time again Brighton Secondary School and their Tachyon team. And Tachyon, of course, is a hypothetical particle that theoretically travels faster than the speed of light. Let's see how quick that car is on the track though.
Now they are carrying some pretty large penalties here. They were outside the regulations on front wing span, rear wing span and rear wing height. Their fastest individual run time there is 1.446, so not really on the pace and probably paying the price for the large time penalties.
Definitely paying the price for those large time penalties because they were doing times around 1.2 for their actual race times. And overall their Grand Prix time puts them well down the order with an overall time of 2.917 for their Grand Prix score.
But hopefully this team can come back next year and try and move up the leaderboard. Another school from Queensland now, the Southport School, entering a team called Storm Chasers.
And the team name reflects the desire to go after something dangerous and to be persistent in that quest. And the team have actually participated before in the cadet class in F1 in schools.
Now, Storm Chasers have built a fabulous looking car. They've got some time penalties for exclusion zone behind the front wheels, front wing clear airspace and their front wing span. So let's see how their performance looks on track. And their individual best run time there is 1.409. They actually had, as you can see, John, a fabulous run time there without penalties of 1.159.
So their Grand Prix time at 2.959. They'd be disappointed with that.
I mean, they're really struggling to be inside the top 25 there, but without their penalty, they probably would have been right up in the top 5.
So our next team comes from South Australia, from the Charles Campbell College in South Australia, and the name of the team is Dextro.
Yeah, a bright green car here, as we can see, so quite a striking car, and I'm sure it'll stand out on track when we see it in a moment.
Quite a radical looking shape there, and the team developed a range of branded products which would help their marketing and their promotion of the team coming into this F1 in Schools competition. So let's have a look at how Dextro went in terms of times. They're carrying some small time penalties. Their fastest overall time are 1.300. Not too bad, but that then translates to a Grand Prix time of 2.673.
Yeah, quite a consistent run there. All of the run times were within half a tenth of one another, and they've ended up midfield. So a good effort from the Dextro team. The next development class team on track are called the Reapers. They're from Christie's Beach High School in South Australia.
It's the first time these students have worked together. They didn't know what to expect when they started or how they were going to get everyone together. But it's been an exercise in really communicating with each other and melding the team around this effort in the F1 in Schools program.
Yeah, upon reflecting on their performance, they said that team communication was definitely an area for improvement.
Okay, for all of that, their time there, their fastest overall time are 1.373, but they've taken some significant time penalties there, Harry.
Yeah, they have. They were slightly over length in the overall length of the car. The regulations stipulate that the car is to be a maximum of 210 millimetres, and they were 215 millimetres. So that's just another example of the small margins we're talking about in F1 in Schools.
So their Grand Prix time 2.826. Putting them just outside the top 20. From the south coast again, from Ulladulla High, and this time it's Speed Addicts, Harry.
Yeah, and another sort of Batmobile looking car here. It's extremely dark, and that sort of actually does stand out on our white track here.
The team brainstormed around a number of different names before settling on the name Speed Addicts, which they say represents the tagline, "Don't do speed, just go fast," which I think is a good lesson for everyone. Okay, let's look at the times. They've set a 1.295, their fastest overall, but they set a very fast time with Car A in their first run, a 1.145, but again, those time penalties really costing them dearly.
Yeah, this team had incredible raw pace. If they can take the lessons from that, look at what they did with Car A, look at how to reduce their time penalties, then this team stands in good stead for the future. Moving on now to another Queensland team. This team are from Holy Spirit College, and the team name Siphon comes from the idea of controlling the movement of water, which with work can even be made to flow up.
So this team didn't know, any of the members of the team didn't know each other at the start of the year. So this whole exercise has brought the team together, most of them Year 8 students from Holy Spirit College. So a great effort there in melding them together, but cooperating and learning how to work with each other. Let's see how that fluid flow works for this team as they try to punch through the fluid surface that is air. And their fastest time are 1.556, but obviously, Harry, some big time penalties there for the team.
Yeah, exactly, and that's hurt them. Their overall time there of 3.161 puts them closer to the bottom of the pack, but nonetheless, for a bunch of students that didn't know each other at the start of the year, a great effort to come together and even have a car on the start line. Our next team are from Adelaide High School in South Australia, and their team name is Riot, or RIOT, which is simply an acronym for Racing is Our Thing. So a great team name for these guys. And like many other students, particularly in 2020, it's been so important for them to communicate via other means, so they've utilised many programs to communicate with one another, given their limited ability to see each other face to face. So,
okay, let's see if racing really is their thing. And their fastest overall time are 1.246, carrying some small time penalties there, Harry.
Yeah, but very respectable. So as an individual time, that puts them right on the edge of the top 10. Their Grand Prix time and a 2.553. So that puts them inside the top 10. So a great effort for the Riot team from Adelaide High School.
So now time to see how Parramatta Marist High School perform with their Redline team. We saw them in a feature story earlier in our presentation, Harry.
Yeah, the home team, so made up of Year 9 students. So I'm sure they'll be very keen to do well. And unfortunately, you know, even though this is happening in their school, the guys actually can't be here to see it.
The idea for the team's name came from a car's tachometer. When a car's redlining, of course, it's being pushed to the limit. So that's what they're hoping to do with their car that they've designed, which they spent many hours just getting the aerodynamics of the car right.
Absolutely. Okay, let's see their on-track performance. So, a 1.182.
Ooh, that is very fast indeed, and in fact that's probably the fastest time of the day, I think.
It is the fastest time of the day.
So no time penalties at all, which obviously helped their effort.
That has translated into a 2.450, so they really laid down the gauntlet here. That's the fastest time of the day to Redline racing from Parramatta Marist High School. Well, we're still coming down from the excitement of what we just saw on track from Redline Racing, but now moving to a team from far north Queensland, from the Mackay Christian College. It's the team called High Talk.
So this team's overcome a number of organisational and manufacturing setbacks along the way by working to develop their collaboration and teamwork skills, exactly the sort of qualities we're trying to help students develop in F1 in schools.
The finished car does look fantastic.
They take a small time penalty for their B car, but none on their A car. Let's see how they go on track.
Well, a fastest individual time there of 1.199, which is actually the third fastest individual run time of the day. So a fantastic effort from this far north Queensland team to be that far up.
And that gives them a Grand Prix time of 2.546, and that puts them well inside the top 10.
Absolutely, yeah, in fact inside the top 8. So a fantastic effort from High Talk at Mackay Christian College. Now to another team from South Australia. This team is called Osprey and they're from Adelaide High School. They're running a very distinctive royal blue car, which looks fantastic, and their team is made up of Year 9 students.
The name of the team is actually a tribute to the Australian bird of prey, the osprey, but of course they've swapped the S in Osprey for Z to give it more of an Australian flavour, and that's a bird that's known for its aerodynamics and its very high-speed flying abilities. Well, let's see if that Osprey inspiration carries through to some times, and their fastest overall time a 1.318.
Yeah, probably slightly disappointing for this team. They carried some pretty large penalties, but the raw pace of Car B, I mean, its fastest raw time was a 1.168. So yet again, we're seeing a team paying the price for being outside the regulations.
Well, our last team in the development class is from Blue Mountains Grammar School in New South Wales, and Team Apollo.
Yeah, lining up in their distinctive flame-coloured car. It actually looks quite fantastic, and it'll be interesting to see how they go on track. Another team made up of Year 9 students, so potentially some students who would look to go up into the professional class in the future.
And of course, one of the things about the COVID situation this year means that the students couldn't be here at the racing, so there was no reaction racing. The cars were set off by an automatic system. Okay, let's look at the times for Apollo. A 1.350 is their fastest time.
Yeah, and a Grand Prix time there of 2.960.
But again, some time penalties there. 0.1 of a second for their Team A car and 0.250 for their B car. Well, that brings to a conclusion our development class racing, and we might just now take a look at who did what and what the leaderboard looks like at this stage, Harry.
Thanks, John. So in first place, we had Redline Racing from Parramatta Marist High School, so a fantastic effort by them. Their time of 2.450 seconds. In second place, Atomic Racing from Riverside High School in Tasmania. A great effort by that team to be just 0.02 off the win. Third place was Aeolus Racing. Fourth place was Allium. And in fifth place, Fast Fusion. Interesting to note also that the top 5 were separated by just 0.15 of a second. So tight at the top in that one, and it was such an intense competition.
It's such a little time, it's almost imperceptible to most human beings. You can't imagine that sort of tiny fractions of seconds that these teams are racing for on this 20-metre track. And what a great job these development class students have done in F1 in schools this year for the state championships. As I say, that 20-metre track has been a great battleground today, and a lot of these teams will see themselves climb up into the professional class next year and in years to come.
Speaking of the professional class, we are going to the professional class soon, that racing coming up. Well, we're now moving into the professional class, but before we go racing, let's have a look what it's all about. The professional class is for students who have previously competed in the development class of F1 in schools, or for those looking to compete at a higher level, with no imposed restrictions other than those outlined in the general technical and competition regulations. Both junior and senior professional classes compete against each other and undergo the same judging process. This is the highest level of competition in Australia and offers students the greatest opportunity to demonstrate their design and innovation skills. Throughout the process, students need to document their progress for a portfolio submission, which forms part of the judging, alongside verbal presentations and trade displays. Students in the professional classes will use a range of software, from CAD and related flow modelling software to various team management applications across platforms. Students need to produce a Model F1 car based on their CAD design using a CNC router. They may also use a 3D printer for front and rear wings, however there is no mandatory requirement for 3D printing and other methods can be used. The professional class also source and/or manufacture their own wheel designs. Professional class teams must manufacture 2 identical race-ready cars based on their CAD design and engineering compliance diagram.
So now for the professional class, and our first team from Canberra High School, Elysium. Elysium is the Greek word, or derived from the Greek word meaning paradise. They've done a great job with this fantastic looking car.
Yeah, now this is not their first time in the competition. They have been here before. They were interviewed on Win News to talk about their F1 in Schools journey and to discuss that. So it's good to see that they've been out there doing some marketing and getting some awareness for their team.
Quite a bit of racing goes on in Canberra.
Exactly. It's a good place for racing. So Elysium's fastest time there is 1.267. Now they were carrying some penalties coming in, so they have had a penalty applied of 0.050 for that run, but still not a bad time to start off with.
Yeah, absolutely. Setting the standard for the rest to follow.
Next car on track comes from Riverside High School, the team called 5 Elements. Now they've come quite a way, all the way from Tasmania.
Well, they said they did a complete risk management assessment on this car, and they found the biggest risk to them was actually mailing the car in. Because of COVID, they couldn't be here and deliver the car themselves. So that, I suppose, speaks to the thoroughness of their risk assessment.
Absolutely, and it's something that all the teams had to consider this year in particular. They couldn't travel with the cars in their carry-on themselves.
Let's see how they go on the track.
A good race time there from 5 Elements, an individual time of 1.215, and that gives them an overall time of 2.482. So a little bit quicker, and that's our new benchmark.
Indeed. Next up, our competitors from Penrith Christian School, the team Axion. And Harry, they've done a great job with this car, very close to the legal weight limit.
Well, exactly. Very, very light car, which will help them, and they have had some good mentoring from Ascension, a team who previously came top 5 at the World Finals in Abu Dhabi in F1 in Schools. So they've got some good support, and we'll have to see how they go on track.
Great looking car. Let's go to the track and see how they perform.
Quite an incredible time from Axion there, a fastest individual run time of 1.084, and it gives them an overall time of 2.315.
That's fastest so far, and that's going to be very hard to beat.
Yeah, a top effort by that team.
Next team on track, all the way from Western Australia, Wesley College, and their Nexus car, which, highly experienced team.
Well, exactly. In 2019, they won the professional class in their state of Western Australia, and they came 12th in the Australian National Finals. So I'm sure they'll want to improve on that this year.
Let's look at them on track. A very quick time in their first run, 1.139.
Yeah, and this team obviously showing their experience, bringing in no penalties, and that will help them moving forward. So an overall time there for Nexus of 2.347. Pretty competitive time. I reckon that'll place them quite high up.
They're certainly in the running.
Our next team is from the Sunshine Coast, Noosa District State High School, and they're called Avalon Racing.
They want to invoke the spirit of King Arthur's victorious fights in the place called Avalon in Celtic myth, so that's the reason they've used the name. It's not named after a beach in Sydney.
Were you around back then, John?
No, it wasn't, Terry. Thank you for that.
Yeah, unfortunately starting with some large penalties though for this car, so we'll have to see how their speed is on track, but they will suffer a bit of a blow there with those penalties. So 1.387 seconds for an individual run once their penalties are applied, and an overall time of 2.925. So not bad, but unfortunately not quite as fast as our previous competitors.
So our next team is from Trinity Grammar School in Kew in Victoria, and their team Hydron, obviously named after the most abundant element on the planet, hydrogen.
Exactly, so they're a reasonably experienced team by the looks, lots of Year 9 and Year 10 students, so we expect them to be reasonably quick, I think.
And the engineering in the car, very good. They've lost no penalty points for design flaws, and they've got the weight down very close to the limit.
Exactly. I mean, this car came in at 50.08 grams, so almost spot on weight there, and that's what we like to see.
And a very quick time for Hydron there. That's going to stand them in very good stead. A 1.122 for their first run, of course, no time penalties.
Yeah, and an overall time there of 2.329, so that actually slots them into second place. So a very competitive time. Our next team hails from South Australia. They're from Cardine College, and this is Team Quantum on track. Yeah,
very experienced team, a lot of Year 12 members in the team, and they've had quite a bit of experience in F1 in schools in previous years.
Yeah, they have. They've competed in the national finals last year in Melbourne, and they finished in 12th place, so they'll be hoping to improve on that. We'll have to see how they go.
A time of 1.396 there, not quite as competitive as I thought they would be.
No, they were carrying some pretty large penalties coming in, which they have paid the price for. Without their penalties, their time would have been 1.196, which, as we know, would be very competitive. So an overall time there for Cardine College of 2.842. Not bad, but I think they would have been hoping for better.
Indeed.
Up next from Gold Coast Christian College, we have Soar Racing. Now, one interesting thing about Soar Racing is that they've, as well as prepared for their own team, have mentored a team in the development class, which we saw just before, Strike One. So they've had a big undertaking, but well done to them for, putting in the work to get themselves there, but also in supporting a younger team. And they're bringing no time penalties in, so I think they'll be reasonably competitive on track.
And indeed, a very fast time, 1.135 for their first run.
Yeah, absolutely fabulous time there, and that will give them an overall time of 2.350, which will slot them reasonably high up the leaderboard. So I think they should be very happy with that effort.
Very competitive. Our next team comes from Victoria, Albert Park College. The team is called Momentum, and of course Albert Park right next to the Grand Prix track, and this team has got a lot of motorsport involvement in their operation.
Yeah, they've done a few clever collaborations, I guess, and deals. So they did an industry collaboration with Gary Rogers Motorsport, obviously a very well-known motorsport team in this country, and they had planned to do a collaboration with my good friends at Toyota, but COVID actually put a stop to that because they were needing to use their machines, and obviously a very sort of innovative team who are trying to do as many things as they can.
So Momentum recording a time of 1.199 on that first run, but they lost a wheel, as you can probably see in the vision there, and overall a time of 2.408.
Yeah, that's unfortunate to see. You don't want to see a car DNFing like that, but it's part of the sport, I suppose, and you need to build a car that's as fast as it is strong. Before we get back to racing, it's time to profile another team. Pacific Hills Christian School in Sydney's northwest have two teams entered in competition, and we're now going to have a look at the Aberration team who are entered in professional class.
For me, the most interesting aspect of being involved in the program was being able to see the process of the engineering, the testing of the cars, the CAD design, the CFD, and also seeing the portfolios being written and coming together at the end.
One thing I had a bit of trouble with, and I think as a team we had trouble with, was time management. We were only given 4 weeks for state, and I think we really had to put out a schedule of what we needed to do and stick to that then.
During the process of making the car and all the different things, there's a lot of cogs working together. I have to get the designs Tom, I've got to work with my team manager, make sure we're meeting deadlines. So really, I feel like my best outcome I've gotten from this is learning how to organize my time.
We only had 4 weeks, meaning I had to cram collecting sponsors, doing risk assessments, doing the portfolio, doing recording, everything into the span of 4 weeks. And that was very stressful, but I was able to manage.
I think the most challenging part of doing the design work for me was having to learn how to use several different new programs. I've picked up new photoshopping skills I didn't have before, Adobe Premiere Pro, Adobe Illustrator. Having access to these has been a great benefit, and I've really enjoyed learning how to use them.
I think the learning experience for me has been quite tremendous for this program. I've learned a lot about different ways of manufacturing, such as using a milling machine, using a 3D printer. Painting is one big thing I've learned, and other little bits of assembly and other tips and tricks I think will really help me later on.
You actually get real hands-on experience. So as marketing manager, if I were to say go into economics, I may have not had this real-life experience of communicating with sponsors in formal language, or say writing up a business portfolio. This F1 experience has brought me the chance to actually experience this hands-on.
We were struggling to find a name. We had a couple of different ideas, and then we'd find, oh, another team's already done it, or maybe it's not the best. I was interested in visual effects and animating and that kind of stuff. So through this, I learned about the term aberration, which in terms of videography is where you have the colors diverting different sections. And I thought maybe this could be useful. And I looked it up, and aberration meant depart from the ordinary. And I thought, well, this really works. This is a name, right? We got our slogan, depart from the ordinary, and our name, Aberration.
I would absolutely recommend F1 in schools for all schools.
I think the F1 in Schools program has done a great job in equipping me with a whole lot of creative abilities, creative skills.
It's really a more practical, hands-on way of learning. It's something where you can get involved and you can start to rely on yourself. I definitely think more schools should start thinking about putting in a team for this. I've learned skills, and I know other members of my team have also learned plenty of skills for stuff like this.
Great to get an inside story there on one of our many teams here at the F1 in Schools State Finals. We'll head back to the track now for more action. Another team from all the way down in Tasmania now, from Queechee High School, it's team iGen.
A stunning looking car with some really interesting elements that may well stand in good stead on the track.
Yeah, absolutely, and this team have achieved a very strong drag coefficient, which is one of the key, I think, sort of elements to getting a competitive time here. So let's see how they go.
Absolutely. And on the track, a time of 1.201 for their first run.
And an overall time there of 2.437. We did have some timing issues there, but we eventually got there. Now they were carrying some penalties coming in, so they probably would have been a little more competitive again were it not for that, but still a strong performance there from iGen.
Our next team up is from Sydney, the Newington College and Instinct Racing. This team's made up of students from year 8, 9 and 10, so it's a real cross-section of age groups. And a very interesting shape for the car with some interesting aerodynamic effects on the car.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great looking car, and this team, like many I suppose, they had to do a lot of their meetings on Zoom during the COVID lockdown, but good to see that they were able to still continue planning and getting the work done to be here at the state finals.
And a reasonably competitive time, but probably not as quick as it could be.
Yeah, so an individual fastest run time there of 1.352 and an overall time of 2.738. But the good news for that team is they're reasonably young and they can come back and try again in the future. Another team here from the capital city of Canberra now, from St Francis Xavier College. It's the team Innovation. Now, they have quite a good looking car and it looks like they've channeled and incorporated a bit of the Italian flag into their overall design.
And obviously coming from Canberra, they've got a few elements there that remind us of cars that Mark Webber used to race in, so channeling their Formula One hero.
Yeah, exactly. Mark Webber's a little bit of a local hero in Canberra, so good to see they've shown a bit of that old Mark Webber F1 car look.
Quite a complex design. Unfortunately, DNFs from one of their cars.
Exactly. So car A managed to finish both runs, but car B, an unfortunate DNF there with wheels and other things coming apart. So very unfortunate that they're a DNF, but they might have to come back and try again next year.
So our next team is from North Queensland, in fact Mackay North State High School, and their team Evolutio.
Yeah, so Evolutio is evolution without the N, and they've named their team that to show how their team's evolved over the years. So a little bit of an interesting fact there.
So this team's done a lot of testing on the positioning of their air canister in the car before actually getting it designed. So that's been a key part of their design process.
Yeah, and it looks like they've done some pretty good times on track here. So 1.214 is their fastest individual time, and an overall time there of 2.685. So not the fastest we've seen today from Mackay North State High School, but not a bad time at all. Next team up is from right here at Parramatta Marist High School. They are the team called Prism, and it's important to note that whilst we are in their, I guess on their home ground here, they can't actually be here to watch like all the other schools.
In fact, they collaborate with the local girls' Catholic school, Catherine Macaulay College, and they actually have a female member of the team from Catherine Macaulay as part of the operation.
Yeah, so great initiative between these two schools. They set up an F1 STEM club to plan for their F1 in Schools journey.
And a very fast time there from Prism. That's going to put them well up the leaderboard. Their overall net time of 1.15 and no time penalties.
Exactly, no time penalties. So this will give them an overall time of 2.334, and that moves them up into third place. So fantastic effort by the local team.
Very good job from Parramatta Marist High School.
Now from Ulladulla High School on New South Wales' south coast is the team of Acroma. Their car a little bit heavy at 55 grams. We always talk in the professional class about trying to be as close as possible to that 50 grams. Maybe there'll be a bit of a weight penalty there for this team.
Every little bit helps, and that's very important in a competition. So very close in performance and obviously the alignment of the cars.
It's good to see that F1 in Schools attracts not only the bigger city schools, but also teams from more regional areas of Australia as well.
So let's look at their times.
An individual fastest time of 1.416 for Team Acroma and an overall time of 2.911. So a pretty reasonable effort there, and I think they should be proud, and hopefully they'll come back in the future and try and improve on that result.
Absolutely. Another team now from across the continent in Western Australia, the Newton Moore High School team of Power Curve.
Yeah, they decided on the team name Power Curve because of the known relevance in motorsport with vehicles having a power curve, and it's something that I'm very familiar with in rallying. Is we talk about power curves and torque curves a lot, so good name there for this team. And they've got a lot of Year 10 students, 5 Year 10 students in their team, so reasonable amount of experience there, and we'll see how they go on track.
Okay, net time for their first run of a 1.418. That's been affected and knocked around by a couple of time penalties that have really pushed their time out.
Yeah, exactly, and that's given them an overall time of 2.896. So a reasonable effort there from the team from WA.
We've had some great racing so far. We might take this opportunity to take a quick look at the leaderboard. Harry, what's the standing so far?
Yeah, the competition's been extremely tight, and at the moment we've got Axion from Penrith Christian School leading. In second place we've got Team Hydron from Trinity Grammar School in Kew. And in third place, Team Prism from right here at Parramatta Marist High School. But that time from Axion of 2.315 is going to be very tough to beat.
We've still got some very fast teams yet to compete, and I think you've got to look at the weight of the cars as being very decisive in the results so far and for the results yet to come.
Exactly, and not only weight but the time penalties as well. We've seen some extremely fast cars go down the track, but they've carried penalties for not being inside the regulations, and that has affected them. So it'll be interesting to see from here whether or not that fastest time of Axion can be knocked off.
Okay, let's get back into the racing.
Now to a team from South Australia, Modbury High School. The team is called Aspect Racing. They have a very, very lightweight car, John, 50.19 grams and 50.17 grams, so that's a good place to start.
That's a great starting point.
Also a mix of experience in the team. They've got some team members who have competed in F1 in Schools before, as well as some new team members to F1 in Schools.
And they also employed some cooperation from the University of South Australia as well, so getting some mentoring from some more experienced and highly skilled engineering brains.
Okay, a fastest individual run time of 1.199, which is a very respectable individual run time, and an overall time there of 2.441. So that'll move them almost into the top 10, I believe, in the overall leaderboard. So a great effort, really, from Aspect Racing.
Yeah, certainly knocking on the door of the top 10 and in there with a chance. So another one of our teams from Western Australia now, from Joseph Banks Secondary College, and the team is Prometheus Racing.
Yeah, great team name there, and they're actually sponsored by Lamborghini of Perth, so a pretty high profile sponsor there, but they do start with a lot of penalties, John, so they have unfortunately gone outside the regulations on front wing clear airspace, front wing span, rear wing support, and the team manufacture wheels. So they're going to have to put down a very competitive time to actually be anywhere near the top 10.
A first up aggregate time of 1.537.
Yeah, and an overall time there of 3.135. So not really challenging the top runners, but still a fine effort from Prometheus Racing. And of course, that car's had to be shipped a fair way to get here from Western Australia.
Those time penalties really telling the difference in the end.
Next team is from Queensland, from the school Ferny Grove State High School, and their team is called Vitesse Racing.
Of course, Vitesse, the French word for speed, so it'll be interesting to see if they can actually translate the team's name into reality on the track.
Now, they do start with some time penalties, and to give you an idea of the scrutineering tolerances here, their wheel diameter was 25.9 millimetres, and the regulations stipulate the wheels must be 26 millimetres in diameter.
0.1 of a millimetre.
Just 0.1 millimetre under, but that is a time penalty. So very, very small margins here that we're working with, but it can have a big effect on their performance. It looks like a fastest individual run time there of 1.387 and an overall time of 2.857. So sort of sitting around the top 20 there, but again, not really challenging our top runners.
Again, those time penalties making a lot of difference to their overall time for the runs. So our next team, another team from South Australia, Brighton Secondary School, and the team known as Unity.
Yeah, Unity, a great name for a team that has to work so well together to be able to achieve good results. This team starting with a small penalty for the virtual cargo area being too small. Their weight is only just over the 50 grams at 50.4 grams, so their virtual cargo area being too small, but I guess their car being right on weight as well.
So Unity's fastest individual times in the first run was a 1.239. That's reasonably competitive, but again, those time penalties are really weighing heavily on that time.
Yeah, exactly, and that ends up with an overall time of, or a Grand Prix time of 2.55. So quite a competitive time, but as you say, they would have been well and truly inside the top 10 without their penalties.
Well, a team here from an extreme regional area from Streaky Bay on the Eyre Peninsula, about 700 kilometres from Adelaide in South Australia. So Swift Racing, they've put a lot of effort in to get their car to the F1 in Schools State Championships.
Yeah, an amazing story. They actually had to do a bit of collaboration with Brighton Secondary College, also in South Australia, in order to be able to machine their car. So they had to use the machines there, but a great effort by these students to be here today.
The car's a little bit on the heavy side, about 14 and 15 grams over the minimum weight.
That normally means that it shows up in the times, and okay, a 1.443 is their fastest individual time, so not bad, and a Grand Prix time there of 2.919. Now to another school from Victoria. These guys are from Trinity Grammar School in Kew, and their team is called Sido.
It's a collaboration of karate term, Sai for sincere and Do in meaning way in Japanese.
Interesting to note also that they created a car with a high centre of gravity based on their learnings from previous competitions. They did some testing and decided that a high centre of gravity was the way to go.
And in fact, a very quick time of 1.122, their fastest time, which was very impressive indeed. And their overall time, a Grand Prix time of 2.376. So that puts them into the top 10,
Yeah,
a very good performance.
Straight into the top 10, so that is a very good performance, and they'll probably be kicking themselves a little because that small time penalty might have affected them from even going into the top 3.
Our next team from the Blue Mountains in New South Wales, Blue Mountains Grammar School in fact, and it's Photonic Racing.
An incredible looking car here. I love, for starters, the white and blue livery, but the front wing is something to note. It's got the most incredible front wing we've seen so far.
Yes, quite high up on the car and very aggressive looking front wing there. Okay, well, unfortunately in the first race there, both cars have failed with axle failures. and that means they're out of the competition.
Yeah, a DNF for them, unfortunately. I guess, you know, having a rally background, I'm very aware that motorsport is about much more than just speed. It's also about strength and reliability. So that team will have to go back and look at strengthening their car for the future.
Our last in-depth profile comes to us from Marist Brothers School here in Parramatta. The Year 10 Prism team have developed a striking and slick-looking car. Let's check it out.
The most interesting aspect of being the aerodynamic engineer of the team was to focus on the aerodynamics and learn more about the industry around cars, and also how aerodynamics plays a major part in the car industry.
My role in Prism was to manufacture the cars, so after the car came out of the mill, I would have to sand them, paint them, repeat several times.
So my role in the team was I was the team engineer, and that involved me designing the balsa body for the car. One of the main challenges we faced was actually physically building the car from the tolerances. When we 3D printed some of the components for our car, we found that in some cases there was a slight margin of error and it wouldn't fit smoothly to the body of the car. So we had to make alterations.
The things that I've learned through going through this process was being able to document work properly and collaborate with my team and learning from my mistakes.
So the process overall, our car went through many revisions. It went about through I think 5 revisions overall, with including the wings and the innovations in it. This was because we wanted to refine our car and make sure that it was the best it could possibly be for the competition.
Our connections with Precision Metals allowed us to have an extra set of eyes looking over the car, doing quality checks to see if even they approved of it, considering they're one of Australia's industry standard companies.
Our team mantra and how we focus and see this competition is we see it as an opportunity to develop our knowledge and skills to expand our career opportunities for the future.
I think it would be quite more stressful, but also a very fun experience if I got into the world final.
I would 100% recommend doing F1 in schools to other students. It's a great experience and it's a lot of fun.
So I've learned that even though sometimes you'll face hardship, sometimes the pieces just won't fit together the way you want to, there's always a way to work around it, to reduce the turbulence, to make it fit.
Moving on now, and this team comes from Magdalene Catholic College in New South Wales, and their team is called Luminescence.
So 4 of the 5 members of this team have competed before, and their main goal is to reach the national finals.
Yeah, it's interesting to note also that this team are looking forward into their future careers, and they are interested in working in the defence industry, which is a lot of what we talk about with F1 in schools and the STEM programs. So great to see that they're already thinking down those paths. And looking at their times now, a fastest individual run time there of 1.192. Interesting to note, that's a very quick time, but some small penalties were applied. And Grand Prix time there of 2.494. So that places them reasonably high up. A good effort there from the Luminescence team.
Just outside the top 10, I think. Okay, our next team is from Canberra, from St Francis Xavier College, and the team of Velocity. Well, quite a complex design for this car too, Harry, including suspension, which not a lot of other teams have incorporated. That's an element of complexity that they may not have to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's good to see people taking the engineering to the next level and trying new things. I think that's what keeps the world of motorsport moving forwards, but we'll have to see how that goes for them in the racing.
Well, in fact, that's caused some issues for them, and the suspension has failed, and they've actually also lost a wheel on one of the cars.
A DNF there for their second car, so we'll have to have a look at that. But a fastest individual run time there of 1.301, so reasonably respectable time there.
and an overall time of 2.646, which puts them well outside the top 10, unfortunately.
All right, the next team up is from Pacific Hills Christian School in Sydney's northwest, and this team is called Aberration. Now, it is a great looking car, I have to say, one of the better looking cars we've seen. Interesting to note as well, they've actually deliberately taken a points penalty in order to try and get the maximum out of this car.
Yeah, they've taken a points penalty in an area that doesn't actually affect a time penalty.
They have done a lot of work this year on preparing this car and making sure it's ready for today.
Well, a time there from the Aberration team of 1.119. That's second fastest so far for the first run. But overall, their Grand Prix time, wow, look at that, 2.295. That is fastest of the day for the Grand Prix times.
Fastest of the day. So they didn't actually get the fastest individual time. That mantle still goes to Axion, but the fastest Grand Prix time. And as we know in motorsport, it is all about consistency, and Aberration have come out with the best overall time. Next team up is from Newcastle, from St Philip's Christian College, and their team is called Zenith Racing. Now, all members of this team competed in the Cadet junior class previously, so another great example of a team who's working their way up and graduating into the professional class.
And of course, the name Zenith comes from the definition, the time which something is most successful. So they're hoping that that will give them inspiration and results.
1.333 is their fastest individual time. They have suffered a little bit under penalties there, so it could have been a bit better. And their Grand Prix time is 2.744. So a pretty good effort there from Zenith Racing.
Yeah, good effort, but outside the top 10 and not really a contender. So our next team is from Melbourne, from Brighton Grammar School, and it's Constellation Racing, and some interesting names of some of the team members here.
Yeah, two of the team members have actually got the same names as F1 greats, Jensen and Anton, named after probably Jensen Button and Anton Senna, I'm guessing. So awesome that those guys are involved in F1 in schools. Let's have a look now at how this team performed on track. And an individual fastest run time there of 1.121, so a very respectable time for the team from Brighton Grammar School.
The Grand Prix time of 2.360, which puts them firmly in the top 10. A great performance there from the team from Brighton Grammar.
Yeah, slots them into 7th place, so a fantastic effort from that school. They should be very, very proud. Our final team in the professional class comes from Eton Community College in Western Australia, and their team is called Flash Drive. Now, a few issues with this car in scrutineering, John.
Indeed, it didn't pass scrutineering. Its ride height was too low, and because it potentially could damage the track, that's why we're running it last. So we'll give it a run down the track and see how it performs. Well, as you can see, one car made it down the track, the other car didn't, so that means the team is actually fully disqualified, didn't pass scrutineering, and unfortunately this team's going to have to come back next year and try again.
Yeah, a long way to travel from Western Australia, but it's a great looking car, so I'm sure if they can get it to meet the requirements to compete next year, then they'll stand in good stead.
Well, that brings to a finish our on-track racing activity from the F1 in Schools State Championships for 2020. And some fantastic racing and some really close performances there. Let's run through the leaderboard, Harry.
Yeah, so the professional class, I think, revealed some very, very tight results as expected. Team Aberration from Pacific Hills Christian School, too good for the rest with their time in the Grand Prix time of 2.295. In second place, Team Axion. In third place, Team Hydron. In fourth place, the local team from Parramatta Marist High School right here, Team Prism. And in fifth place, Team Nexus. Now, one thing that's amazing is how close the racing really was. Just 0.05 of a second separating the top 5, so some very, very tight racing today.
But of course, the on-track activity is not the only thing that the F1 in Schools competition is judged on. There's a whole lot of other criteria, Harry.
Exactly, so the racing accounts for just 20% of their overall score. They now have to go and be judged on their portfolios, so their engineering and enterprise portfolios, as well as their social media, their team uniform, because as you know, F1 in Schools is so much more than just the car itself. It's an entire team, and everyone has a very important job in making sure that the result is what they want at the end.
Well, we do look forward to seeing who makes the National Championships and bringing you that action further down the track. On behalf of Harry Bates, the reigning Australian Rally Champion, and myself, Jon Thomson, we thank you for watching.